Hello and welcome to a little quick guide on Lacerate of Haemorrhage, the Bleed edition, of course. Haemorrhage, as is in its name. It's a max block Bleed Gladiator, max true block, both attack and spell block, and it does bleed. It's a very simple old-timer build that has been improved to be a little bit modernized, and it is not at all an expensive build, and you can use this one basically everywhere as it's very cheap to league start, and it can improve over the course of your investment. However, I wouldn't go over around 15 to 20 divines for it, as there is no need to, because there are simply better builds that will do with more investment. This is just a melee build that I wanted to make as a guide, as a prelude to my Lacerate of... not Lacerate, pardon. Lancing Steel of Spring, sorry, took me a bit. Lancing Steel of Spring, as I have recommended people to go with Bleed Bow Gladiator, and it is not for everyone. However, this one is a melee build, so you can continue going on with it. Now, when it comes to the build itself, the build is tanky. The build has, as I said, max block. It goes with cast when damage taken high level. That's why we need over 3.5k life. It uses Jack the Axe, which I will explain shortly when it comes to the POB. But this is just a short intro to say how it goes. You can start leveling with Lacerate, no problemo. It's gonna work well. You will just need to be in blood stands more often than in sand stands, because blood stands for regular Lacerate gives you bleed % chance, and Lacerate also gets more damage on bleed stance, which is perfectly fine. I use sand stance when it comes to clearing monsters, as that's a very good defensive stance. Now, when it comes to what can this build do, this build can do any content that is packed with monster density that has monsters on us. Now, that is Ritual, Ultimatum, Harvest. Even though Ultimatum is a little bit iffy and you need to pay attention a lot, but you can still do Ultimatum. I'm doing Ritual here, as Ritual is pretty much brain off. And you can do Harvest. What cannot it do? It can do also Abyss, as you can see here. It cannot do, as an example, Legions well, because it's a bleed build, it's a low-ish damage bleed build, and because it's lowish damage bleed build, this is meant for you to actually get to higher level as possible, like as fast as possible, with being as safe as possible. Now, because it's a lowish damage bleed build, it won't clear a Legion in time. I haven't tested it fully, but there's no reason to, because there are better builds for a little bit more investment than there is for this one. Now, other notable content, it can of course do Searing Exarch, Eater of World monsters, it can do Guardian maps, Maven Guardian maps, because it's pretty much safe to do so. So there's nothing there. However, Expedition would be the one that I would be very careful of, as Expedition has monsters overwhelm, physical damage reduction, and as we are armor based as well as block, so whatever goes through the block, if it's a spell, if it activates our cast when damage taken, great. If it doesn't activate our cast when damage taken, most likely we're dead. It also dies and suffers from regular things, which is poison on ground, burning damage on ground, any dot damage on ground. That's basically where it suffers from, so you cannot just sit still and do things. However, on most of the bosses, you can tank Shaper Slam with no problemo. It cannot do Uber bosses, as it's not made for that low investment, but it can basically tank this kind of boss in a tier 16 map, which is perfectly fine. Now that will conclude the introduction part about the build, And here we have the gear that I'm currently using. Now, the build goes and revolves around Jack the Axe Val Hatchet. As always, everything is written in the notes. I will cover every point separately, nothing to worry about. And pay attention to the notes, please. So Jack the Axe, I currently use the one with chance to fortify and cause bleeding on hit. That was just a corrupt that you got. You don't need this chance to cause bleeding on hit. You just need fortify for the end because you want to have as high fortification stacks as possible. This is an axe that gets you Thirst for Blood skill. Thirst for Blood skill is a skill that sacrifices a bit of your life, 8.62. It's 10% life reduced by mana reservation multipliers and modifiers on the tree. So 8.62% of life. That gives you 20% more damage with bleeding and applies beams to the closest 5 nearby bleeding enemies. Regenerate 400 life per second for each affected enemy. So that means we have 2k life per second if there are 5 enemies that are bleeding around us. So basically, regen is good. However, it can still suffer from no regen or degen on the ground and things. Now, that's basically for the hatchet. It gives us damage over time multiplier from bleeding from hits with this weapon. This is a 1 chaos axe, usually, that can cost 30 to 50 chaos with fortify. That's it. However, you do not need fortify on the axe. You can get fortify on the body armor. You will just sacrifice maximum resistances for it. That's basically it. Nothing to be worried about. This is a very cheap build. Now, the shield, which is Bis, is the Surrender as my tower shield. This drops from Ul Netol as the Anticipation, and you can upgrade this via Blessing of Ul Netol to get the Surrender. It is cheaper, almost half price, to do it like that. Buy the Anticipation shield, upgrade with Blessing of Ul Netol, and boom, you have the Surrender. Don't buy the shield itself. Yes, it has a lot of life recovered when you block and things, that's completely fine. It goes from like 250 to 500, something like that. 250 to 500, yes. It doesn't matter how much it recovers, it's going to be fine. Don't waste your currency on getting a better one. If you want to waste your currency, slap a divine on it, or just sell this one and buy a new one. It's whatever. Just please, don't buy the Surrender directly, buy the Anticipation and do Blessing of Ul Netol. You can, of course, farm Breach for it. That's completely fine. That's the Bis shield. The shield before that is a Lionized Remorse shield, which gives us armor, stun and block recovery, a lot of life, reduced movement speed, less fizz damage taken from projectile attacks, and chance to block. It's, again, 1 to 5C shield. Very, very cheap. Now, the Surrender is... Anticipation is 10 to 20 chaos usually. Surrender is around 1 divine, and Blessing of Ul Netol is like 40, 50, 60 chaos. So it's half a divine for the shield. For another unique ring, Circle of Guilt Iron Ring with Herald of Purity, increased buff effect and physical damage while affected by Herald of Purity, and increased quality physical chaos damage modifiers. This was a 1 divine purchase because I wanted higher percent increased buff effect and physical damage. You can go with lower, that's completely fine. Usually it's under 10 chaos for low rolls, like 40 to 50 rolls. If you want higher rolls, it's going to be more. I didn't want to like go with the cheapest of the cheap. I just went with 1 divine purchase, as I think 20 divine for a build that you're going to play for 20, 30, 40 hours is not that much, especially as you can farm Chaos Orb recipe to get all of this. This is also semi-SSF friendly. Ryslatha's Coil, which I had from my Bleedbow Gladiator, which is a very, very good belt where you hit with more damage, the bleeds are going to do more damage. That's it. It increases our maximum attack damage and it lowers our minimum physical attack damage. And we are also going to be using volatility with it, so that's going to give us a lot more maximum damage, which is going to increase our bleeds a lot. Let's go the regular gear. Helmet I also kept from my Bleedbow Gladiator. This is a Chaos Resistance Fracture, and you slap essences of loathing, or what was it, for mana reservation efficiency. I will add this into the notes. Don't worry, I've forgotten. and that's how you craft the helmet. You smack it until you get tier 2 or tier 1 resistance, and I got life and whatnot. If you don't get life, you can craft life, that's it. For implicit, searing, and ether until you get mana reservation efficiency and reduced mana cost of skills. Body armor is chaos resistance fracture. You do not care for links because you can do links pretty easily with bestiary. I have the bestiary guide as well down below in the description. You can do Black Morgan to get it to 6 socket 6 link pretty cheaply. Now what you do here is you slam it with an essence. I did Essence of Hatred to get another resistance, and then I got Life and Armor, and that's basically 3 suffixes, 2 prefixes, and I added chance to block spell damage. This is mandatory to add chance to block spell damage so that we get spell block capped. Now for the implicits, chance to block attack damage and 1 to all maximum resistances are very good, as chance to block attack damage caps us 5%, and 1 to all max res just gives us 1% more tankiness. Gloves. Gloves are chaos resistance fracture as well. You will see this pattern repeat with a lot of my builds because I want chaos resistance to at least be positive, if not more than 40%. Now these are the ones that I used on Lancing Steel, if I'm not mistaken, or I bought a different base, doesn't matter. I used Deafening Essences of Zeal for attack speed and got fire resistance with it. Yeah, I bought new bases. I did not use the previous ones, and I got tier 1 life. Lucky roll. It is what it is. If you don't get life, you just craft life. If you do get life, you craft increased damage while leeching. Very simple. For implicits, overwhelm, phys damage reduction, and increased attack speed are generally good physical implicits to have. Boots. Boots are the ones that I have used on my Lancing Steel. I divined them to 60% chance to avoid being shocked because I didn't want to lose the increased armor from equipped helmet and gloves. If you don't get this, however, you can follow my build guide fully. It's in the notes, and I will also link it in the description to craft ailment immunity boots. So instead of increased armor from equipped helmet and gloves for Eater of Worlds, you will do cannot inflict ailments, or like chance to not get inflicted by ailments. That basically adds us to 100%. That's it. That's the cheaper variant. It's total of 2 divine craft, maybe even a divine and a half. That's how it is. Sometimes it's 2.5. So it's between 1.5 and 2.5 divines. That combined with Storm Shroud Jewel is going to get us ailment immune. That's very important. Amulet. Amulet is just a bog standard turkey's amulet with dexterity and intelligence, as we need those 2 stats for this build, with added fortitude to all attributes and also added fortitude to strength and intelligence. You can do this by slamming essences. I bought this one. Fire damage to attacks is a wasted stat, and phys attack damage leeches mana is a good stat, as we need a little bit of leech, or you get it on a jewel, perfectly fine. Non-channeling have -7 total mana cost, that's fine. Now, we added the Anoint Arcane Guarding, which basically gives us more spell block chance. But when it comes to the necklace, it's basically an attribute stat stick. If you can fit it, it's an attribute stat stick. If not, we can change the necklace. You can change it to an owl's necklace and things, but there is no need to. This build works perfectly fine as is. Ring 1, which is Amethyst Ring, which I have personally crafted. This one is basically the one that I bought a base for. So this is how you craft the ring. You bought a Warlord's base. It doesn't matter what it is. I chose Amethyst Ring because I wanted Chaos Res. You buy that one. You grab Harvest, Blue Life Force. You go to Horty Crafting Bench. You click Caster. You put it in, 75 in, and click Craft until you get Vulnerability and something useful. For me, it was 14 to all LRS, 22 intelligence, even though we don't need it, 14 to LRS, melee damage, whatever. You want vulnerability, life, and things. And Mark of Submission is extremely cheap. 1 Chaos Ring, that's alternative for the curse until you get the Curse Ring. Amethyst Ring you can get. You can get any base ring. It doesn't matter if it's Amethyst. Any item level will suffice for the beginning. Later on, you just want something higher than 79 or 80 that gives you tier 2 resistances, basically, if you want to go that route. That's for the gear. For the flasks, however, I have not finished my flasks. I will say what is this one. Divine Life Flask, which is alarmed. That's basically panicked. Reduced amount recovered, instant recovery in low life, immunity to bleeding, corrupted blood. Very good instant flask when we are half life. Transgressor Granite, gain 1 charge when you're hit by an enemy. You won't gain 3 charges when you're hit by an enemy, and armor during effect. And you want this to be on what's it called? Use when charges reach full, as I don't have good flasks here. Basalt Flask, the same thing, gain 3 charges, and for Basalt you can do attack speed perfectly fine, same thing. Sulfur Flask, Consecrated Ground on use, gain 3 charges when you're hit by an enemy, reduced effect of curses on you during effect, because we want to reduce the curse effect completely. We want to annul them so we don't have any curse effect on us, so curses are basically worthless versus us. And Silver Flask, 2 charges when you're hit by an enemy. You can do movement speed, you can do whatever. I did regenerate 3% of life per second during effect, because that's a very, very good crafted mod. So I will change that one too. Nothing to worry about. I will change them to their good variants. I will do at least 2 charges instead of 3, because 3 they can be kind of expensive. It could be a divine per flask. Now, cluster jewels. Large cluster jewel is a bog standard. Fuel the fight, smite the weak, wound aggravation. Attack speed, mana leech. Smite the weak is attack damage against maimed enemies, and attacks have 10% chance to maim on hit, which we do not use. And wound aggravation, axe or sword attacks deal increased damage with ailments. And we have fist damage over time multi while wielding axe or sword. We do not use the third one. We use the third one only to get these two in. This was 1 divine jewel with chaos resistance, nothing too expensive. Small cluster jewel, as you can notice, we do not use mediums. Small cluster jewel here is 50C purchase to buy an uncompromising, which is determination, increased mana reservation efficiency, armor, chaos res, lightning res. You can make this better by adding additional effect to it. 25% increased effect, 35 is irrelevant. 25, and you can just get a bit more mana reservation efficiency. However, this build does not spend any mana whatsoever, as Lacerate is like 12 mana, and the regen just you can just keep spamming it. That's basically it. That's all there is to it. So you won't have to worry about that one. Now, when it comes to other jewels, cheap jewel for spell block, which is Impossible Escape, which gives us passives in radius of Rune Binder, can be allocated without being connected to the tree. Rune Binder is here. This is spell block. This jewel is always very cheap, as not many builds, or if any builds use it, it's 20 chaos or something. So it's very, very simple, but it gives us a lot of spell block. Now, Blue Nightmare can be expensive. I bought it for 60 chaos. It can go upwards of 1 divine. And what does it do? It gives us gain 7% of lightning damage, extra chaos damage. That's irrelevant. But passives granting lightning resistance or all elemental resistances in radius grant us chance also to block spell damage at 50% of its value. So we have here a wheel with elemental resistances while holding a shield. This gives us block. Gives us block spell damage at 50%. This gives a lot of block. If I remove that one, my block chance 75 spell goes to 65. This gives us 10% chance to block, which is amazing. Spell block, which is amazing. Okay, now Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame are inspirational. That's the 5th Ascendancy, sorry. I keep saying 6th. 5th Ascendancy, and that is usually 2 to 3, maybe 4 divines total. To get early league, it's 6 to 7, but it is a perfect way to get an additional aura, which is basically the banner, war banner. And Watcher's Eye, which is 50 to 100. See, you can go 2 routes. One route is increased physical damage while using Pride, which is what I've chosen. Flask Charge crit precision is whatever. We do not crit. We have RT. And you can also do reduced extra damage from crit strikes while affected by determination. Both are good, but both are very good, but they are very expensive, 20 plus divines. So be warned. I've also put the links in the notes. Now, when it comes to leveling this build and things. I will go over gems at the end. Leveling this build, follow all the acts, all the skills, all the things here. I have posted it, as you guys are probably used to it now. Everything is labeled through the acts. So everything through the acts is absolutely labeled. Every item here that you can get, base ones 3 to 5, acts up to 5 are basically just links. 6 to 9 is where you need resistances, stat stick, and 1 extra if you have 1 chaos extra, belt of the deceiver. And then in act 10 you can start farming chaos orb recipes and then finalizing this. And then white and yellow maps, I've also added what you can do for the items and how you can cover. Red maps equals cluster, impossible escape upgrade. This also follows this 1 to 4, and this follows here 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, which is expensive upgrades, which is basically how the build is. Now, let me go over one last thing, which are gems, and that's basically going to conclude this one, as I make very detailed guides in POB themselves, so you can read all of this. I'm basically second or third monitor material to Babylon. Anyways, Lacerate of Haemorrhage with Malefice damage, multi-strike, brutality, swift affliction, volatility. You can improve these by awaken swift affliction, awaken brutality, awaken Malefice damage, and of course, if you have the money, but please don't do this, awaken multi-strike. That improves the damage by a lot, and it also adds crushed, which gives us a lot of damage if enemy is crushed. That gives us, here it gives us like 3-4%, but it's higher the higher you go. Now in the shield we have counterattack, which we have Vengeance, Pulverize, and Life Gain on hit. Vengeance is a swift counterattack against all enemies around you when you are hit, and this is a very good one as our Ascendancy gives us double damage on counterattack. I will cover that at the far end. And you want Pulverize for area of effect, more melee damage, and the life gain on hit because we want more life restored. Now, cast when damage taken is basically max level, with max level Molten Shell and max level Blood Rage. The reason for this is I wanted to automate everything, absolutely everything, so I don't have to worry about things. And I automated Blood Rage and cast when damage taken. The moment we get hit with Blood Rage that it applies, we start getting frenzy charges, and then we get Fizz attack damage leached as life, which is going to give us more regen and things. And we of course need that the moment when we get cast when damage taken procced on Molten Shell, which is going to take. How does this work? When we get hit for more damage than this basically says 3272 minus 10%, so around 3.1k. When we get hit by that attack gets deducted with Molten Shell, which we get a buff from our armor that basically on this build it gives like 3-4k shield roughly, so something needs to hit us for a very, very high amount so that we can actually die. And then Blood Rage then gives us more attack speed and more regen, so that's basically automated. It's a 2-button build, one damage and one jump. You don't have to swap the flesh and stone. You can, but you don't have to. Now, auras. This build has a problem with 2 Enlightens. If you do 2 Enlightens, which are very cheap, 20, 30, 40 chaos, you can do all of these auras. If you cannot afford the second Enlighten, if you can afford only 1 Enlighten, or if you cannot afford any Enlightens whatsoever, you disable them and you disable Pride. Pride is basically our aura, or you can disable Herald of Purity. Whichever aura you disable while you don't have Enlightens is fine. I am doing 2 Enlightens because they are very cheap and they help with the build a lot. Now, auras number 1, we have Tempest Shield, mandatory, Spell Block, Determination, mandatory, Armor, Defense, Herald of Purity, optional, gives us more damage with physical, and we have Sentinels that can basically take aggro as well. Auras 2, Enlighten again, War Banner, free banner because of Inspirational, gives us physical damage. Nearby enemies take increased physical damage, and accuracy is worthless for us because we are RT. We are Resolute Technique, as it's a bleed build, at least for starters. Pride, which is later on for damage, purely damage aura. And Flesh and Stone mandatory aura, which basically gives us nearby enemies are blinded while in sand stance, and nearby enemies are maimed while in blood stance, which gives them actually increased physical damage taken. However, big note, Blood and Sand has two auras, Blood and Sand, and Flesh and Stone. Flesh and Stone and Blood and Sand. Blood and Sand is melee only, gives us melee benefits, but it reserves 10% mana, while Flesh and Stone is semi-defense, semi-offense aura, which is 25% mana, which gives us benefits as well. Now, for Blood and Sand, it gives us more area damage while in Blood stance and less area of effect while in Blood stance. However, more area of effect and less area damage while in Sand stance. But Flesh and Stone gives us the benefits I have mentioned, and our Lacerate has AoE as well as a tag. Now we have Automated Enduring Cry, Call to Arms. That's basically here because we want that extra regen, and it gives us endurance charges, which we need. Leap Slam and Faster Attacks also goes well together, just so it is a faster slam. Now, let me explain the Ascendancies, and that's going to be it for the video. Ascendancies, you start with Arena Challenger charges. When you kill an enemy in Sand Stance, you gain a Challenger charge, which gives us attack and movement speed per each. It's 10% maximum. You also have a chance to gain a Challenger charge when you hit a rare or unique enemy while in Blood Stance. So we have 10 Challenger charges. Now, the second Ascendancy is Blood in the Eyes. Attacks have 50% chance to cause bleeding. Attacks maim on hit against bleeding enemies, which is basically a slow. Chance to blind on hits against bleeding enemies, which is very good defense. And enemies maimed by you take 10% increased physical damage. This stacks with Blood and Sand maim aura. Gratuitous Violence is the third one. Bleeding enemies you kill explode, dealing 10% of their max life as physical damage and more phys damage over time. That makes the bleed pop, which is a very good thing. Damage. And the last one is Painforged, plus 10% chance to block attack damage. This doesn't give us maximum block. This gives us 10% chance to block. Keep that in mind. Cannot be stunned by hits you block. We are rarely stunned. It can happen from time to time, but we have good measures of recovering from it. And your counterattacks deal double damage. Keep in mind, counterattack is the Reckoning from the shield. Vengeance. Vengeance from the shield. And there's one more thing now that I mentioned Reckoning. Surrender has level 30 Reckoning skill. Reckoning is another counterattack in a cone shape when you block with your shield. And that triggers when you block, and it's triggered, you can't use it directly. So basically that also gets bonuses from life gain on hit and pulverize support. So we have two counterattacks, Vengeance and Reckoning, Vengeance and Reckoning on the Surrender shield. But that is going to conclude this quick and easy build. It is SSF viable. I do not know how much though, because you need to work that one yourself, as I'm playing in Trade League. It is yes, it is level 100. That's completely fine. If you want to see how it's gonna perform, if it's not level 100, just remove like dirty techniques, or remove like a big cluster, just add a small cluster. Or remove physical damage here. It's whatever. Just remove nodes that are basically damage nodes until you level up, and then add damage nodes while you're leveling up. And that's it. You can add the jewel slots once you get the jewels. So as an example, Watcher's Eye. If you don't have levels for that, just unclick it. That's level 97 immediately. The rest of them the same way. If you don't have inspirational and things, you can remove 3 points, 3 passive points, and so on. But yeah, this has been requested as a melee alternative to my starter builds for especially for Lacerate of Spraying, so you can transition this build into Lacerate of Spraying without any problems. You can use similar gear as well. It uses a lot of those things. You can recraft stuff. It's perfectly fine. Or you can just play around with it and enjoy it as a build. You can also, instead of Lacerate of Haemorrhage, you can also do Cyclone, so you can spin to win, right click through the map. It will most likely, not confirmed, most likely work. But that's it for this video. Sorry it has been long. It has been very detailed. I'll add the details. I haven't, nothing to worry about. Everything is in the description below. If you've liked the video, please do give it a like. Sub if you don't mind. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next, most likely, PoE stream. We still have two months of this league. Oh, one more notice. My builds are universal. So that means any league, anything, you can play my builds. I do not use things from the league unless it is specified so, because my Cleave of Rage does use charms and stuff. So keep that in mind. My builds are universal. They will be updated every season with the little brackets and things. But the POBs and stuff won't change, as there's no need to unless they do a massive overhaul somewhere. So thank you once again for watching. Have a good one, and I will see you in the next video or stream. Have a good one.